Cool. Hello, can everyone hear me? Great. I think we'll get kicked off. It was a great segue from the last panel into our panel, which will discuss the critical success factors of a CBDC implementation, or rather, as we put it in the program, how to make a CBDC a success. Of course, we know that central banks are undertaking operational, reputational risk when embarking on implementing a CBDC. And there's been much talk in terms of adoption, these types of things. And we are really just going to unpack today with my fellow panelists here, both offline and online today. I'm really pleased to be joined by everyone. Just what goes into constituting a successfully implemented CBDC. I don't think we've just yet seen something like that across the planet yet, but since CBDCs were first posited a few years back, many CBDCs have seen the light of day, in fact, in different jurisdictions, and the rubber has met the road. So we do have some insights, and we can learn from those jurisdictions, and I think we're going to hear some of the inputs from our panelists, esteemed panelists here today. My name is Conrad Kraft, of course, as I was introduced so nicely by Max, or Marcel rather, and I would just give my fellow panelists a chance to introduce themselves, perhaps starting to my immediate right. Stefano, would you like to go ahead? And then after yourself, maybe to Anne, and then to our online panelists, each luminaries in their own regard, Velko and Sonja. Stefano, on to you. Just a brief introduction of yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Conrad. First of all, thank you for the invitation. My name is Stefano Leucci. I'm a lawyer as a background and with a PhD in computer engineering. So what a particular situation to be discussed on CBDC and privacy, because actually I'm working at the European Data Protection Supervisor. That is an agency of the European Union that deals with data protection matters in the EUIs, the European Union institutions. Before passing the floor, just to give you an example, to be concrete on this, if you are in Frankfurt and your data are not processed well by the hotel where you're staying, you go to the National Data Protection Authority. But if the European Central Bank here in Frankfurt is processing your data in a bad way, when you, for example, apply for a job, you come to us, the European Data Protection Supervisor. And there I'm leading the Digital Euro Task Force to follow the evolution on the matter. And the floor to you, Anne-Sophie.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Anne-Sophie Gogel. I'm from the Bundesdruckerei in the value printing department. That doesn't sound very digital, but we have been accompanying the central banks since quite a while now, and so we look into central bank digital currencies, and myself, I do that since like 3 years now. And yeah, I'm a DI expert as well, have been chairing some working groups on privacy and on the public digital euros. So yeah, happy to be here and to discuss with all the experts from the digital euro ecosystem, let's say. Thank you.
Velko, please go ahead. Brief introduction.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Velko Andriasevic is my name. I'm coming from Swedish Central Bank, Sveriges Riksbank, and my background is actually coming from the technology side. I'm electrical engineer in the background and spent I get terrified to say, but more than 30 years working within different technologies, mainly within finance sector. I'm leading work with the technology side of CBDC effort of Riksbank, meaning e-krona, how we call it. And I am actually involved in a lot of those issues and questions, even on policy side, privacy side, and actually all questions around how to make CBDC success or how make it available and adapted by the public. As a part of my work, I'm also participating in the work with the international organization such as Bank of International Settlement, International Monetary Fund, and others representing Riksbank in different activities. And associations. Very interesting for us. We, as you know, for Krona, we've been now it's 7th year we are working with CBDC. So we manage over the time to collect some experiences and to have discussions and investigate and elaborate on different issues. It will be a pleasure to join the panel today. Thank you.
And finally, over to Sonja.
Hello, everyone in Frankfurt. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonja Davidovic. I am at the BIS Innovation Hub in the Singapore Center. Here in Singapore, I'm the center's central bank digital currency lead. I spent most of my career at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., working on in various roles and departments. And most recently at the IMF, I was a digital expert in transformative technologies and closely engaged in the fund's CBDC technical assistance program. I then decided during COVID, I wanted more hands-on experience. So I moved on to the European Central Bank, where I worked briefly on the digital euro investigation project. And then wanted to shift focus slightly to the cross-border domain. So the projects here in Singapore are mostly on the CBDC cross-border aspect, where I co-lead Project Mariana together with the Eurosystem and the Swiss centers. And I'm also going to be leading the post-Project Dunbar work for our center. In addition to that, we work on various other engagements. As you can imagine, we're quite busy. We're preparing with the Indian G20 presidency a report on the lessons learned from our projects, which should be interesting and informative to everyone, I hope, and working with various other institutions and central banks on many CBDC-related initiatives. Pleasure to be here. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Hopefully next time. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Great. Thank you, Sonja, and thank you to everyone for being here. It's a great honor to be on the panel with you today. Let's just start with the delineation of terminology. In our previous panel, we heard that we have yet to see a successfully implemented CBDC anywhere across the globe. So let's just unpack what you would understand as success for a CBDC. And I'd like to open that question to all the panelists, perhaps starting with Anne. What would constitute, in your opinion, a successful CBDC in any one jurisdiction?
Yeah, thank you. I think success can be measured by different criteria, depending on what the central bank wants to achieve with the CBDC. And so this could be use or transaction rate of financial inclusion, number of use cases in the industry, just to name a few, or digital inclusion. We heard about it in the panel before. I think in total, or to conclude, a CBDC must have a value added to the existing payment system. And this is one of the most important points to make a CBDC a success.
Just to follow, anyone else,
yes.
Feel free to step in.
Yeah, maybe just continuing a bit a discussion on the panel before, and also revealing a bit of pressure here about privacy. The security in payments is something that is around by years. Somehow, it's one of the most important aspects to be considered to, how can I say, make a payment system adopted by the wider public. And I have in mind PCI DSS attempt, just one of the first. We at the EDPS, at the European Data Protection Supervisor, we would like to see this aspect as in a broader perspective and in a deeper perspective. So privacy in CBDC to us is a key element of success to consider here. To use a bit of a marketing terminology, I would even say it can be considered a unique selling proposition. That's what we are trying to develop also, because privacy in financial system, in payments, it's not such a well understood domain so far. Also because to us, privacy is a very tangible aspect. It's not only about principles and human rights, but it's also about features, implementation aspect to be on this.
Great. Any of our remote panelists want to touch on that topic in terms of success?
I think I can start with that. Please, Sonja, please.
Oh, I just really briefly, I like Ed's point about starting with a problem statement. I think this is key. Keeping the use cases in mind and the policy objective behind the CBDC should ultimately be the driver, and that will ensure success. What I also think is missing currently, and this is why we see quite some issues with adoption, what I see missing is designing CBDC with the user in mind, like having a user-centric design in mind is crucial, because co-creating and co-shaping the product with the end user is vital to ensure adoption, but also success ultimately, because people will have, and the end users will have a sense of ownership in the product and are more likely to use it in the end. Like, yes, there are market and research studies, which is great, but really the best product is the one that has been developed together with the users. I think it's vital to emphasize that. And then the other thing that I just wanted to add to what has been said is that central banks need to acknowledge that issuing a CBDC is not the average central bank project. It's much more complex and much more involved than people think. It's a multi-year, multi-stakeholder, multi-agency effort, especially for the retail domain. So it's crucial that the project set up from the get-go with an interdisciplinary team in mind, and make sure that all stakeholders are engaged from the very beginning. I would also add, as a final point, that the cross-border element and the future-proofing of the CBDC design should be kept in mind also from the very outset of designing a CBDC, to make sure that there are no costly overworks or redesigning that is needed as policy changes, as technology changes, as systems need to be interoperated both vertically and horizontally across borders. Lots of times we see that systems are designed with a single use case in mind, and that means ultimately that it's successful only for a short period of time. I'll end there. Veiko, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that being a part of the central bank, I mean, we see it as a very complex issue. Just blindly looking at the numbers would be misleading. There is a number of different components in the CBDC implementation. We should always remember that the two main tasks of the central banks are monetary policy and financial stability. So the environment we are working in, trying to support both the private issues, privacy, security, safety, and combining with the task of the central bank, means that we would need to be quite flexible, defining what the success factor for CBDC would be. I would say that probably I wouldn't expect it to be like taking a major share of the market and the payment or whatever it is like that. It's mainly finding the proper relation between CBDC, whatever kind of solution it will be, and the existing payment solutions or existing types of money on the market. At the same time, I fully agree with Sonja. I think that if we are talking about from the public point of view, really success of CBDC is adaptation. It's finding the proper use case that will help people in everyday's life. I mean, filling a gap or providing something more easy to do, just improve everyday life. And this will actually be, I guess, the main driver for CBDC adaptation, and with that actually success of CBDC.
Thank you so much, Veiko. And I think, yeah, it's clear that there's no single definition of the success of a CBDC. And as we've heard, there are various ingredients that go into it. and they need to be finely calibrated, not too successful, but also not unsuccessful totally, that all the operational and reputational risks are fully borne. And with that said, and Sophie, perhaps let's start with you. We talk about adoption, these types of things. What could central banks potentially undertake to ensure greater adoption? You did mention a few metrics earlier. But what would this look like, and how can central banks play a role to ensure CBDC adoption within their jurisdiction? What are some of the factors?
Yes, thank you, Konrad. Well, I think, first of all, the central bank needs to analyze why they consider a CBDC. So as I said before, it could be like financial inclusion. We heard about it this morning already, or digital inclusion, speed or cost of transaction to reduce it. So of course, we need to see the value added, and also what happens to other parties in the financial ecosystem. So it's not just like a central bank is coming and saying, well, we have a CBDC now. No, it's a whole ecosystem who will be involved, who needs to be involved, and who will also be attached by that. So we have to first analyze what are the key factors before going into the implementation. Jerome Powell said in CBDC it's better to be right than to be first, but at the same time we learn from other countries who already implemented CBDCs how the reaction of the population can be, what is going well and what is not going well, and that's how we also can learn to see where to go. And when we come to implementation, it's very important that the implementation is secure and user-friendly. So to include also privacy. And if we look at Nigeria, we did already this morning, they are brave pioneers in implementing CBDC. They have my highest respect. But the population didn't really accept the implementation as they did now. So they have to reconsider their solution. It's a big privacy topic. And here we go. I guess in Europe, this topic, privacy, will one of the main topics we have to address in communication, in technology, but also in regulation to make the digital euro a success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anne. Of course, learning from those who have come before us. People can, certain jurisdictions can learn from those who have already implemented it. And that's one of the benefits, of course. And value propositions, like you mentioned, is key to adoption. Perhaps over to Velko now. How we talk about matters of public trust. We've seen a couple of protests against the implementation of CBDCs, in fact, right here in Europe. Perhaps if you could outline for us, Velko, what can be done by central banks to ensure public trust within CBDCs, such that the success, the rate of success or the chance of success is greater rather than not?
Sure. I would say that certainly the trust for us as a central banks is the most important thing, I would say, we are working with. That's actually what we are dependent on. And when we look at the trust, meaning actually trust means actually for the public to feel safe with the product, whatever it is. In this our case, it would mean actually using CBDC in a proper way. And feeling that trust and feeling safety is actually a combination of a few different things. As we've been talking about what will be adaptability, what will actually move people to starting, is actually providing something, proper functionality that will help them in everyday life. But that itself is not enough. What it's also needed is actually that they can preserve a feeling of privacy and integrity combined with the safety. So actually what it means is we will need to have a proper functionality, proper function for the end user. We will need to ensure that they feel safe using the product, but they also need to feel they preserve their integrity and their privacy that they have. And I would say if any of these capabilities missing, people will probably not feel proper trust in the CBDC in the future. And what we see as our role as a central bank is actually working and providing first, let's say, playground for the CBDC, which means basically rules or regulations that make it, providing actually the ground, the basis to make it as a safe product at the end. But we also have a major role in educating people. And education of people, it means actually providing enough information, understanding what CBDC is, how it can be used, and what to expect of that. I mean, that's a future new type of money, or actually existing in a few countries already. And the people need to understand that combination of what to expect and what it really provides. In order to do that, we also need to work on the background. I mean, working with technology, with the system that we implement, that will need to provide those three functionalities. They need to provide the proper functionality, something make people want to use it, make their life easier. They need to ensure privacy and integrity, protecting private information. And they also need to provide enough level of security so people feel safe when they are using CBDC. I do believe that providing this combination from the central bank will provide a very good ground to start implementing and hopefully succeeding with the CBDC implementation.
Thank you, Veljko. Yeah, some very interesting and very integral matters such as education mentioned there, of course, to garner public trust. Can we trust this instrument? What will happen? You know, why isn't money digital already? What's the difference between CBDCs and the bank transfers that I'm already undertaking? These types of educational questions are absolutely essential to adoption, of course, as mentioned, and the garnering of that public trust for the end users, ultimately, who will determine whether it is a useful instrument to transition over to. Perhaps over to you now, Stefano. Let's have a look at the regulatory aspect of things. We know that the investigation phase of the digital euro is one of the aspects that it has been implemented for, is to understand what sort of regulatory changes or amendments are necessary to accommodate a new instrument such as this, a CBDC. You know, that's part of the investigation phase. So to that, I would ask you, what regulatory frameworks could support a CBDC adoption, you know, or success, and how can central banks work together with regulators to promote its use and the successful use?
Yes, $1 million question, that's for sure. Well, you know, given the shape of data protection that is the point of view in the regulatory side that I'm working on currently, creativity is what we need to have. And I explain better in this sense. You know, we need to find creative and innovative solution, as by the way we were saying even before this morning, to wire privacy, wire security and data protection inside the core design feature of CBDC. And that's not a simple game, because this requires someone that is able to understand both the legal requirements and also the deeper and technical and so complex issues into the CBDC development and also deployment sphere that is highly complex. You know, this year, the 25th of May, will be the 5th birthday of the GDPR. This thing that has bothered us so much and has made us like not dreaming and not dreaming well for many times. But you know, GDPR, even if it's not perfect, GDPR is a golden standard for the entire world. We can absolutely say this. Many jurisdictions around the world are getting inspired and are literally copy-pasting and adapting the European approach to data protection. If we look inside this piece of legislation, well, it's quite a short one, even though it touches on almost any aspects of our life. And that's because it's principle-based and risk-based. So to answer your question, in the GDPR, we will not find a written solution. So we will not have something that we can take and apply. So the complexity stays in being very strict on the principles, so reminding that we need to stick to what's written there, but become very flexible in the implementation. So what we can achieve in practice in order to reach what is needed by the system. And when I say the system, I mean the economical system, the euro system itself. What we think is very important is also to have a clear business case. This word is around us by months now. But if I translate this in terms of data protection, in terms of literally what Veiko was saying about adaptability, about the fact that people will actually use those tools and digital euro, CBDC in general, it's very important because people need to understand why such an interference in their privacy is needed from an economic perspective, and they need to justify this when every day we'll start using this kind of tool. That's to us a very important thing that is needed to convince that it worth the effort. So that it's not something that can be used, because in this way we will follow some other not that much successful use cases, as Sophie was saying. On the other hand, we need to find a way to do what we can say like a sophisticated risk management approach in terms of data protection that we've been exploring into the DPS actually, because we are trying to support the ECB in its implementation. We had the chance to discover and deepen inside these aspects in two occasions. The first one actually was with Veiko in December with our webinar on CBDC that you can find online. And the second one was a paper that we released just 2 days ago. It is a tech dispatch on central bank digital currency. The first part of this paper was explaining in simple words to people, to the layman literally, what a CBDC is. You cannot believe, but this was the most difficult work of my life. How can you explain to a person the difference between commercial bank money and central bank money, or the settlements, no? In a sense that everyone will literally understand this. Well, on top of it, we had also a second section that is dedicated to risks. So not solution, but risks. And if I can cite like the three most important one, the first one would be the complexity in identifying the roles and relationship with all the different stakeholders that will touch on personal data, even if we can say, and we've read that many central banks around the world are trying not to see personal data, but it will be hard. And on this, I would also to echo what Alexander said from Banque de France before of me. Cash is the only form of money that is anonymous. Anything else that passes in a digital tool, in a digital mean, leave traces, leave breadcrumbs of our data, and somehow has an interfere with privacy. So this needs to be considered. The second part is the fact that it will, for sure, have a kind of systemic risks for profiling, and it will literally give, if configured in some way, a deeper invasion of privacy. No? So that's also to be considered. And the third aspect is a data concentration. We will have places in our economies that will have a huge quantity of data there, and a data breach in such kind of places might create a huge damage to people. So to go also to the other part of your question, and then I conclude, how to work with central banks, how regulators can work with central banks. That is a big question we are trying to address, we ourselves, trying to support our counterparts here. Well, there are many ways that can be followed, usually in the common understanding of how a data protection regulator works. You can think about auditors. You can think about someone going there making questions, trying to see the issues. But our approach here would like to be the opposite one. Regulators have usually, in the data protection spheres, two hats. One is the auditor, that is very important. But the other one, thanks to the privacy by design concepts and so on, is the advisor role. So what we are trying to do here is to start a job that is a kind of a new, that is based on a collaborative, innovative, and agile approach to stay on the side of some of the teams that are developing these kind of solutions that have huge difficulties in understanding where to put the threshold in different situations, how to consider the data, is it anonymous or not? Or is there a possibility to do a settlement in a way that pseudo, I don't know, some kind of very complex technology will surely respect privacy or not? So be able to be at the forefront and be on their side to address those kind of issues to us is very important, and it's what can really make the difference, also in terms of adoption.
Great, thank you so much, Stefano. Indeed, the regulatory environment must support the safe use and talk to public trust as well, knowing that there would be a sound regulatory regime to protect users, but also to penalize those who violate in the law itself, whether it relate to privacy or other. Of course, very important. And all of these go into the cake, the successful cake of the CBDC. These are all the various ingredients, a sprinkling of well-defined regulatory environments, a sprinkling of privacy, or maybe a lot of privacy, right? Spoonfuls of that. Let's have a look at international cooperation. We know that central bank digital currencies do not exist in silos. These are obviously multi-jurisdictional discussions, especially if we're going to be talking about things like cross-border, smoother cross-border payments. Data is going to traverse borders a lot more seamlessly than it would previously, of course. And we know that a successfully implemented CBDC would require a multi-jurisdictional discussion, harmonization and collaboration, so to speak. This talks to all sorts of things, whether it be technological, regulatory, and other. Sonja, perhaps would you like to take us through the role of international collaboration by central banks to ensure successful implementation of CBDCs?
Sure, my pleasure. I think the overarching framework for international cooperation has been the G20 roadmap to enhance cross-border payments. And under that umbrella, we have various initiatives that are unfolding. So we have working groups that are looking at interoperability, regulatory or technical interoperability, but also at things like how can we harmonize financial integrity standards, for example, or how can we build next generation financial market infrastructures that will help us move the needle on cross-border payments. So within that umbrella, the BIS Innovation Hub is specifically looking into how technology, how we can identify and deploy trends and latest trends in technology to build and develop and build a public good, right? We're always concerned with building something that is broadly available, broadly accessible to the wider public. So it's not like a walled garden, but rather something that can benefit the larger central bank and a community and also the population at the very end. So for that, with that mandate or with that sort of vision in mind, the BIS has set up a number of BIS innovation hubs, as you may all know. One of them in Singapore, and then Hong Kong just recently launched the Eurosystem one in Paris and Frankfurt, London, Stockholm, and then strategic partnerships such as the one with the New York Fed. Within the core mandate of the BIS Innovation Hubs is to provide a forum or venue where central banks can really work together and build synergies out on some of the things that are common to the cross-border aspect. And we really want to foster this knowledge exchange and just provide a network for among central bankers to exchange their expertise and build out on each other's work. So the various hubs work with their host central banks. In our case here, it's the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And then we work with regional central banks mostly, but not necessarily, on various initiatives. For example, and one of the projects I work on right now is Project Mariana, that is exploring how we can leverage a concept from the decentralized finance world, like automated market makers, to improve foreign exchange trading and settlement using wholesale CBDCs. It's a first cross-center project, meaning we work here from Singapore together with the Eurosystem and the Swiss Center, and we also work with the Swiss National Bank, Banque de France, and the Monetary Authority of Singapore in designing this architecture that can help us move the needle on how we think about foreign exchange trading, foreign exchange liquidity, and ultimately settlement using a wholesale CBDC. The findings of the report will come out in the summer, so I encourage you all to read up about it. And I think what is really different and what is really valuable and what the BIS Innovation Hubs provide is that they give central banks a safe space to explore cutting edge technology and concepts. And that is something that is invaluable because, as we have discussed here, trust is important and central banks have a reputation at stake. So they don't have the luxury of trying it out and failing, as in they're always in the public eye, and monetary policy consideration, financial stability considerations are high on the agenda. So ultimately, the BIS Innovation Hub provides that safe space to test out different technologies. And I think that is of immense value for trying to put our heads together with the central banks, but also with private sector actors such as commercial banks, financial institutions, payment system providers, and technology providers. Our projects nicely build on each other. Project Dunbar, that you may have heard about, that was run out of the Singapore Center, concluded with the findings that we could explore using an AMM for the trading and settlement of CBDCs in a multilateral context. And it got picked up by this project Mariana I just mentioned. So it goes to show that projects really build on each other. And I think ultimately what we will see come out of the BIS Innovation Hub is that we'll have a more holistic approach in how we think about our projects, how it all ties together. So that's something that really is important to show that we really think about this holistically, meaning we're not just like exploring the technical feasibility of a platform, of a multi-CBDC platform, but we're also looking at the commercial viability, the legal viability, and ultimately the desirability from a policy perspective as well. So that is a more integrated approach in looking at things, and then involving all the stakeholders who bring different type of knowledge and experience and skill set to the table, which is also important to note in the international context. One project I wanted to highlight in particular here, one project that is closer to more than any other BIS projects to becoming a real life example of success where CBDC or cross-border, not necessarily CBDC, it's actually connecting instant payment systems across multiple jurisdictions. It's Project Nexus. I encourage you to read up on the blueprint that just came out recently. As I said, it's not CBDC related, but I think that we have to look at various angles of how we enable cross-border payments, which includes also instant payments, instant payment systems, and how we interoperate and connect them. So we are at the Innovation Hub really kind of at the forefront of cross-border CBDC and cross-border payments exploration. And we always look forward to, once a project comes to a level of maturity, such as Nexus, to help facilitate and help the central banks across the world really breathe life into this. The BIS itself cannot be running and operating a payment system, but what we can do is facilitate this journey, bring the relevant stakeholders together and help them think through this and operationalize this project in the real world. So I think there's an immensely valuable contribution to the international cooperation that the BIS Innovation Hub can provide in the long term.
Great, thank you so much, Sonja. And perhaps just staying with you for a second, if possible, in 45 seconds, would you be able, I think we'd be a little bit remiss not to mention wholesale CBDCs in this discussion. What's the difference in designing a retail CBDC versus wholesale CBDC for success? What are the design features? Just take us through some of that really briefly, please.
Absolutely. I think we mentioned a lot of the points. So on the similarity side for both retail and wholesale, I think Anne-Sophie did a great job with explaining, start with the problem statement, start with the use case. From there, you devise your requirements, and then at the very end, you pick your technology. I think that is critical in ensuring success, not to be starting with a technology choice first. Then, as I mentioned earlier in my early intervention, allowing the participants and the end users to co-create and co-shape the product for you to give the sense of ownership and ultimately ensure widespread adoption. Acknowledging that it takes an interdisciplinary team to pull the project of this magnitude off. That's really critical. People underestimate, such central banks, I would argue, underestimate the level of complexity it takes for such an undertaking. On the differences side, because the policy objectives for retail and wholesale will differ, they do differ. We have seen in the latest BIS survey, CBDC survey, that countries' issues retail versus wholesale coming from different public policy objectives. So that means that design choices will be prioritized differently. For example, offline will matter more in the retail context than in the wholesale, for example. That is important to remember. And then retail, I would argue, is much more complex, involves a multi-stakeholder approach, more so than for wholesale. And also the legal viability aspect is much more involved. I mean, you asked the question earlier about what regulatory measures and policy changes need to happen. And I think for retail, we will see a larger degree of complexity and much more involved legal work that needs to happen to pull off retail than for the wholesale domain. I will end here. I hope we get some interesting questions from the audience, because that ultimately is why we're here, why we're on this panel, right? To enlighten the audience.
Yeah, I think we are just about out of time now, unfortunately. But thank you so much for all the inputs from everybody and our esteemed panelists. Thank you for your time today, and thank you to the audience as well for your time and attention. Feel free to reach out to us after the panel if you'd like to discuss anything. Unfortunately, those online wouldn't be able to answer your questions. But with that said, it's the end of our panel discussion today, and we hope you look forward to the rest of the program, and have a good one. Cheerio.
Bye-bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Oh, no.